If you don't know me, my name is Charlie, and I'm the Head of Technical Development and Cybersecurity at Ramsack. I wear many different hats in my role. Chiefly, I work to identify new products and services that we can offer to our clients to improve their engagement with Ramsack and their cybersecurity posture. And there is also an operational angle to my role. So we run the cybersecurity services and a number of total IT services such as reporting, monitoring, and new starters and leavers from my team. And I'm always looking for ways for Ramsack to be the secure choice for our clients. So if there is ever anything that you think we are not doing or we could do better, I would really encourage you to reach out to me and I'd be very happy to have a chat. And just to mention, my colleague Bokeh, who oversees Cyber Essentials for our clients, will also be on hand at the end to answer any questions that you may have. So today we are going to be exploring a bit about the exciting world of patching. And I suspect some of you are thinking that this isn't the most thrilling topic in the world, and maybe you are right. But patching is one of the most important basic measures your organization should be taking to safeguard from cyber attack. So today we're going to walk through what a security patch actually is, what systems need patching, and it might be more than you think. We'll talk about the problem of vulnerabilities and the constant battle against them. And I want to make this real for you, so I have some real examples of breaches due to a lack of patching. We'll discuss the core patching principles, and finally I want to leave you with a bit of a checklist to take away so you can assess the risk to your organization and whether you need to take further steps to protect your data. So first off, what is a patch? Well, typically it's an update to a piece of software or operating system. Let's use our personal mobile phones as an example. We periodically get updates from Apple, Google, Samsung to our Android or iOS operating systems. And these updates provide a number of benefits. New features. I'm sure other Apple device owners here will know how Apple love to talk about their new version of iOS that comes out each year, all the new cool stuff it can do, and then of course how half of it won't work unless you upgrade to the latest handset. There may also be improvements, maybe to speed or the optimization of services. And of course, there's fixing bugs or when things are broken. But arguably, the most important reason for updates is to fix security flaws in these products. It's through the exploitation of these flaws that cybercriminals can cause serious damage, such as infiltration and data theft. So what needs patching? Well, let's start by thinking about what technology, assets, and equipment we have in our organization that interact with our data. The first thing that might spring to mind are what we would classify as endpoints. So these are end user devices. Commonly, these are going to be laptops or desktops and mobile devices. And we're probably fairly comfortable with these and how these are updated. We're used to seeing iOS and Android system updates popping up on our phones, as we said earlier. And we occasionally get prompted to restart our computers following the latest Windows or macOS updates. If your organization is hosting any infrastructure, so by this I mean things like servers, databases, maybe you're hosting your own website, and whether this kit is on-premise, it's physical, or it's in the cloud, it's virtual, we know that we need to be keeping these systems up to date as well. Updates to these sort of systems are usually more impactful, so they may happen less frequently. And then we have network devices or edge devices. And these can typically get overlooked, but are actually super critical as they're the entry point to your environment. They include things like firewalls, VPN gateways, remote access devices, and access points in your office that provide a secure network for you. But they're a real target for cybercriminals. And this isn't an exhaustive list. You need to understand all your assets used across your organization. I want to take a moment to deep dive into one of these a little bit further, and that is patching a Windows laptop. And many people think that by installing the latest Windows security updates that pop up every month, that this is enough to keep their device secure. And unfortunately, this just isn't the case. These type of regular monthly updates that we see are typically what we would refer to as operating system updates. But to understand these a bit better, let's use the analogy of a house. And the operating system is essentially the structure or the foundation of a house. They are absolutely critical to the integrity of it, and patching could be seen as performing maintenance to the core structure of the house. But there is always more to be patched. Software, the applications that we install on our devices to be able to do our work, include things like browsers, Microsoft Office, core line of business applications, and these have to be kept up to date too. Sticking with our house analogy, think of software as our furniture and our appliances in the house. Keeping these up to date and refreshed is also really important, especially if that washing machine breaks. And finally, we go a bit deeper, and this is firmware. This includes things like drivers, which make your keyboard and mouse work. They are core to the hardware of your device. In our house analogy, this would be the pipework and the electrical circuits. These also need maintaining so that we don't get a burst pipe or a blown fuse. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that there's actually a lot more we need to consider patching than just the operating system. Software and firmware are often very easily overlooked, but can present gaping holes to your organization. Now we know what we need to be patching, it's important to talk about what the patches are patching, if that makes sense. And they are fixing vulnerabilities. A vulnerability is a known weakness, i.e. a bug, in a piece of computer code that can be exploited by cybercriminals for a variety of purposes. For example, some vulnerabilities may allow an attacker to deploy malicious code to a device or a program, or perhaps gain access to an organization's data repositories, or even allow an attacker to take remote control of a device. And any piece of software or code can be vulnerable to attack. As you'll see from this chart, identified vulnerabilities have been increasing year on year, and in just 5 years, they have more than doubled. And these are across all sorts of systems, software, and some of these vulnerabilities impact multiple technologies. You can see 2024 was a stonking year for vulnerabilities, and this caused some real issues actually within the NIST. So the NIST are the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they are the body in the United States who assess and scope vulnerabilities. The sheer number of vulnerabilities, coupled with some staffing issues, resulted in a huge backlog of vulnerability assessments last year, and this likely led to more vulnerabilities being exploited by cybercriminals due to that delay. And how is 2025 looking? Well, so far this year, there are almost 11,000 vulnerabilities reported so far. So this trend of increases shows absolutely no sign of slowing down. I want to ask you a question. So in your organization, do you use Adobe products like Adobe Reader, Acrobat, and Photoshop? And what about things like Google Chrome, which is a very popular web browser that people may prefer over Edge? So take a little moment and think about how many vulnerabilities you think have been reported against these products of all time. Well, for Adobe products, this is all Adobe products, it's 6,155. For Google Chrome and Google Chrome alone, it's 3,602. Ouch. And how confident are you that these software are being updated across all devices in your organization? Having visibility of the vulnerabilities across your IT estate is vitally important. They need classifying so that you know the most critical ones and where to focus your attention to remediate a potential threat or hole in your network. So identity attacks are the main vector of compromise during a cyber attack. And by this, what I mean is exploiting business accounts, so your Microsoft 365 accounts, via methods such as phishing, social engineering, and credential theft. We know that phishing is that main attack vector. But the second most common vector is exploitation of vulnerabilities. Cybercriminals invest a huge amount of time and resource into identifying exploits in key technologies, and are then able to capitalize on these very, very quickly, and sometimes will even beat software vendors to a patch. It highlights just how important it is to apply patches that fix critical vulnerabilities as soon as they become available from a vendor. We'll now walk through a couple of real-world examples of how vulnerabilities have led to data breaches. So a recent high-profile example was the 2023 exploitation of a vulnerability in the Move It transfer application. What this is a bulk data transfer tool. It sits on internet-facing servers, and it's commonly used by organizations to share data in and out of the organization. This particular vulnerability was rated 9.8 out of 10 by the NIST, which is an incredibly high score. Essentially, a vulnerability was identified in the Move It application, and this was disclosed by the vendor called Progress. They shared a patch for it and encouraged organizations to apply it as soon as possible. Unfortunately, in the time it took some organizations to react, this vulnerability was exploited by cybercriminals. They were able to deploy malicious code using the exploit, which enabled them to both access data that MoveIt had access to within the organization, but also intercept data that was being sent and received. And they were then able to exfiltrate this data. Big names such as the likes of the BBC, British Airways, and Boots all had data stolen, including employee-sensitive data, as a result of this vulnerability. And it's worth emphasizing here that the software vendor disclosed the vulnerability and provided a software update at the same time, but it was still exploited by cybercriminals before a number of organizations applied the patch. It highlights just how important it is to apply security updates and patches as soon as they become available, especially for critical vulnerabilities like this. My second example is another high-profile example from 2023. So this vulnerability was in the Chrome browser and was scored an 8.8 out of 10. And in my opinion, this is even scarier than the previous example, and I'll show you why. So the way this vulnerability worked was a cybercriminal would send a phishing email containing a link. And when this link was clicked, it would open a specially crafted website built by the cybercriminal. Now, if the end user was using Chrome, then this website was able to exploit the vulnerability in the Chrome browser, and allow the attacker to execute some code on the end user's device. And this could include things like ransomware, encrypting all data on the device or wherever it had access to. So the attacker didn't even need to hack into any accounts or break into any network. All they needed to do was trick a user into clicking a link. And this shows the importance of keeping browsers up to date as well. Now, a lot of them update automatically nowadays, but that doesn't always work. And when we roll out our vulnerability management service to clients, we always, without fail, find old browser versions on client machines, and these could be vulnerable to attack. Okay, let's walk through some of the core patching principles to keep your organization safe. First off, and if we think about the slides earlier, you need to understand all of your technology assets. Asset inventories are super important here. As we established with the laptop example, you also need to understand at what levels patching is needed, firmware, operating system, software deployed to this kit. The use of a vulnerability management tool can really help you to understand what you actually need to patch and also what you should prioritize. Are there critical vulnerabilities on a subset of devices? Well, then tackle those first. Wherever possible, you want to patch as soon as a high severity security update comes out. It's important to find the balance between patching fast and minimizing impact from potentially faulty patches, but these are much less common nowadays. And the way to do this most effectively is to automate your patching as much as possible. And finally, you need to make sure that the patches are fixing these vulnerabilities. You need various levels of reporting to check that your systems are being kept up to date and also help you identify when they are not and when action must be taken. I want to make a notable mention to Cyber Essentials here. So if you don't know, this is the UK government-backed security certification that all organisations can strive to achieve in the UK. And it helps you to really demonstrate to your clients that you are taking cybersecurity seriously. Now, Cyber Essentials stipulates that organisations must promptly deploy software updates, particularly when they have serious implications for security, within 14 days of them being released. So if you're a Cyber Essentials organisation or are seeking to achieve it, how confident are you that all of your systems are being patched within 14 days? Do you know how many of your systems are out of date or vulnerable potentially to exploitation? So where do you go from here? So I'd like to walk through this checklist with you. Now, if you can tick all of these off, then you are honestly doing a fantastic job, and I commend you on your patching strategy for your organization. If you can't confidently check some of these off, that's fine, and I would encourage you to reflect on this presentation and have a think about what you need to do or what help you need to be able to meet these objectives. First, do you know all of your assets? Everything from workstations and mobiles to Internet of Things devices connected to your network in your office, such as maybe speakers or even a smart dishwasher. Then, do you know what vulnerabilities exist across these assets? And a vulnerability management tool is critical for this. Do you know that all of your assets are on the latest versions of operating system, software, and have all available firmware applied? Do you know how these get regularly updated and how often they get patched? And then finally, ongoing reporting is needed to check that patching solutions are working, but also to catch any devices that fall out of patching cycle either by mistake or due to some technical issue. Okay, and then how can Ramsack help? So we have a number of patching services to assist our clients with their patching strategy. Our total IT clients benefit from automated workstation patching as a core part of our service, and we aim to apply critical operating system updates as soon as possible, normally within 1 week of them being released by vendors. We also have firmware and driver patching options for your workstations. These can be a bit more impactful for end users, so we usually come up with a plan to roll these out for you before we turn them on. We can provide manual or automated server patching depending on your requirements and the criticality of those servers. And in October last year, we launched our new VMAS product, which is Vulnerability Management as a Service. This includes vulnerability reporting across your workstations and servers, and also third-party patching of core software across your workstations. And finally, we can also perform manual network and firmware patching of devices, such as things as access points and firewalls as required. And that brings us to the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for listening. I really hope this has been useful. We'd always be very happy to help and to have a discussion with you if you have any questions or would like to discuss patching for your organization any further. And if you do want to discuss patching in any more detail, obviously speak to your relationship managers. If you're an existing Ramsack client, reach out to me direct if you like. More than happy to have a conversation.